Hello all, a Knife Tale here, bringing you a look at this Bestech Blind Fury. And honestly, when I saw this knife, it just spoke to me. It just did. It's one of those things. I'm pretty sure that's a Kombou design. Kombou. I don't know how he pronounces it. Kombou is type of what Japanese call seaweed, a type of seaweed, but it's not spelled quite the same. Close. I don't think that's what he's named himself after, but that's just side fact, completely irrelevant. As I said, when I saw this thing, it spoke to me, and I like it. You've got a very dramatic shape, very pointy Tonto, on bearings, in M390, frame lock, with a flipper and a front flipper thing, which we will get to when I start talking about the knife. But we start off with specs. Blade length, slightly over 3.5 inches. It really feels like a small knife. It's not. I'm going to call that 3.6 inches. Eight and 3/8 overall, so 8.4-ish. Not quite. Well, that handle's easy. 4 3/4. 4.75 on the inches. Not terrible handle ratios. Though again, it doesn't feel like a lot. It feels like there's a lot more handle because the blade gets so pointy and thin, and it also feels very small probably because of its dimensions, which, as you will see, it's actually bigger than the Conspirator by a decent amount. I mean, it's not a large knife by any means. It's still that full-size knife, but it just doesn't present that way. It's thin, long. It folds up into itself really well, especially towards the back. I mean, the blade completely disappears in there. It is contoured. Lightly contoured. And there's a lot of, in traditional Kombou fashion, there's a lot of chamfers and milling lines and everything like that, adding depth to it. This is basically where the contour runs along the inlay. This is cut into, so it doesn't contour, but it would normally be contoured. You can sort of see it on the scales. It's pretty small, pretty minimal, despite packing a decent sized blade and having quite a bit of personality. Compared to the AA batteries, you got pretty much that much room and grip, just a little bit less, and you've got this, which gives you a little bit of extra room. I don't want to go up here, it's not a choil, but I'm willing to put my finger like partially over top of that to get a little closer if I need to. Either way, it's actually quite comfortable right there. I typically carry this thing and use it like this, where I'm not completely back here in this, but I'm up here, which is interesting because when I go actually back here, in my hand, I feel the tip of that clip poking into the main pad on underneath my index finger, which is not uncomfortable, but I feel it more. If I just shift slightly forward and I still feel completely locked in and safe here, it's super, super comfortable. It disappears. It's funny how small adjustments can make all the difference. But we're talking about ergos before it's time to talk about ergos, because we have to finish with specs. 3.99 ounces, 4 ounces. Not an ounce an inch, but very close. Very good ratios, not perfect. It is a T8 pivot and T6 on everything else. As always, I don't like T6s. Let's see, how deep of a T6 are they doing here? Very deep. This is a tooled T6 where it feels Oh, no. This one's very deep, but this one is not as deep. I have had this knife apart once. Yeah. Yeah, I had no problem with it, but as always, get rid of the T6s. Just my opinion. And pretty much everybody else's. Except for the knife companies, apparently. What are you going to say this time? 5. Surprising. Handle thickness. Over half an inch. 542 thousandths of an inch. Blade stock. I guess this is about where it is, where it's at its thickest. 150 thousandths. Wow, that... First of all, it doesn't look it because there's a big old swedge here. And it does not feel like it's got a 150 thousandths blade stock. Is it flat ground? I mean, it looks hollow ground. Not a super deep hollow, but it does look like it's hollow ground. But it drops down quite dramatically. Let's see what it is behind the edge. I've never measured this thing, and I haven't sharpened it. Behind the edge, it is... No, that's slipping down the blade a little bit. 17 to 18 thousandths behind the edge. It's a little thicker than you'd think. Like, it looks like it's a razor thin sort of blade. It's not. It's got a little bit of strength there. This is a happy all-around kind of medium. It probably gets thicker up into this tip or on this secondary bevel, but how much thicker is the question. It gets thinner. No, I guess it's about the same. Okay, there's not that much transition. The tip is pretty pointy, but it does actually get a little thicker once you finally get to the tip. Because that would be really, really easily snapped. So it's not quite as thin as maybe it looks. I mean, it kind of feels like it should have a hollow grind on it. If it does, it's pretty shallow. But it's not too thick behind the edge. It doesn't... I have to admit, it really threw me off. I really thought this was going to be a hollow grind. Which is weird. Normally I know these things before I buy. I'm just trying to see how fast it gets thick. You have a bit of life on this thing before it starts getting too thick. The stop pin is internally mounted up here. Right there, you can actually see it. It does appear for a moment. So you can do whatever you want to the edge, be it cutting in more choil or anything like that. So you got a decent amount of life. I mean, as soon as you start sharpening this thing, you're going to start losing some of all this definition, and this thing's going to start getting smaller with the swedge and everything, but you can do it. Shouldn't be a problem, because you may want to cut into more choil, because the plunge grind hits the edge, unfortunately. It almost hits the edge. It's very close. That could be improved, but I don't know. This is a very artsy design knife that's going for a certain look. I'm not going to knock it super hard. It's not just a utilitarian. But let's be honest, they could do better. Especially considering the blade is sort of the... I mean, the whole thing is a showpiece, but the blade really is dramatic on this knife. We're out of specs, so let's just do a quick talk about this knife. You got jimping up here. that is very functional. This is very grippy jimping. It's very comfortable. You got a little notch here to rest your thumb. This is pretty good. The blade is, as I said, very dramatic. There is some billboarding. You have Bestech knives with their logo. I don't know why companies insist on this, but one, your logo's right there. You don't need anything on the blade. Two, and this is more important, why do they put a logo and their knife and the name of the company underneath it? I don't understand that. If you're going to put the name of the company, what's the point of the logo? Just be known for your logo. If that's what you want. I don't know. Kombou's Maker Mark, M390. The banner billboarding is very minimal here. It's up on the flats where I like to see it. It doesn't really take away from the blade, in my opinion. I'm not going to knock this one. Got a frame lock with decent access. It's not coming in from the side access, but it is wide enough and bowled out enough that it's not hard to get to at all. It is on bearings, though it feels like it might be a little bit dry in there. Yeah, I probably need a little bit of oil. This one has been hidden away for a while. I haven't carried it recently, and that's probably part of the reason. Titanium handles with a very attractive blue anodization. In this case, it's got this silver aluminum carbon fiber, which I really, really like. There are other variants of this thing, different carbon fibers and such. What the heck is that? Ah, apparently I nicked the pivot just a tiny bit when I took it apart the first time. Interesting. Or Pocket did that. Either way. I like this carbon fiber. I want to see someone use a side cut piece of this carbon fiber. That could be cool. That's just a side thing. Pivot collar. Captured pivot. Great. Lock bar insert. Great. Frame lock. Cut out there. It's far enough away from the clip that it's not really a problem. The clip is a bit long. That said, because of the lock bar cutouts here, if the clip was shorter, it could actually start causing problems with it. So then they might have to move it on the inside. It would be a whole thing. Clip works well. It's a little pointy at the top because it's got sort of this peak milled area where it's super thin. It's a little pointy. It's not really sharp. They've done a good job handling it. And again, in hand, if I'm up here, just a tiny bit further forward where I like to carry this thing and use it, it's comfortable. Going back a little bit, the longer clip does touch into this main palm, part of my palm, but it's still pretty darn comfortable, honestly. In both grips, super neutral ergos, though it gets thinner, which I don't always like, but they've done a good job of it here. It doesn't feel bad. Normally I like it getting a little thicker, but this is, of course, part of the design here. Neutral grip. A lot of very clear, good places to put your finger, but you're not completely forced into a specific grip. I mean, you have clearly your fingers here, but you have the ability to move around and still feel like you're getting some effect from this jimping. So it's nice. Well done there. The backspacer is cool on this thing. As you can see, it's got a backspacer with a milling, but it also narrows to be semi-floating, which is kind of cool. I like that. You're nowhere near the edge on this thing. This thing is, though, I will admit, you have a lot of space in between because it is a reasonably thick blade stock. I still can't touch the edge, and I can't touch the tip. So they've done a good job there. The clip looks like it would be weird and uncomfortable and make things thick, but it just sort of is the handle, right? It's the whole back end, so that just feels like what the knife is. It doesn't feel different. It doesn't feel like there's necessarily what I'd call a clip there. It just feels like that's how thick the knife is in the back. Centered, no play. I typically will not accept a knife that has play in it, especially at these price points. But I am picky. Though I think that's reasonable. Now, actuation methods on this knife. You have the front, the regular flipper, which is minimal, but works super well. Tons of leverage, super easy, very snappy, very poppy. And then you have this front flipper. Front wheel, front thing. I do not like the way they executed this. First of all, funny enough, this part of the jimping that you interact with it when it's open, very grippy. It's very big jimping, but it's sharp enough and it's very grippy. It's still probably not, wouldn't make for the greatest front flipper, but it would work. But up here, when it starts transitioning, the jimping completely changes. It's a little thinner, but it's not grippy. It's not deep. It doesn't feel like it's really, for me, you can do it, but it is kind of difficult or uncomfortable. It is much easier to actually go down here on the front of this front flipper. Hold on. And everything's falling now, but that's starting to bother me. Just take a tiny bit of nano oil. The tiniest, minimalist half drop touch to the front of that detent ball with oil. And boom. Yeah, it got dry from being away for a while. There we go. All better. So, you can actually see a bit of a transition here. It's not just a perfect wheel around. There, it goes a little straighter here and then it starts curving. If you actually use this part of the wheel, you feel like you're low, but it works. Kind of better almost. It's still not the most comfortable front flipper. I mean, you can go up here, but I don't know. It feels weird. And like, if I want to go into the middle here, I slip up. Ow! That's just skin. Yeah, it's just ripping me apart. You see, the front flipper is not the greatest on this. You either want to go all the way up, in my opinion, and just sort of push on it, and it's not always easy. Or the better option is just to go way down here, up in the front. And you don't want to front flip it like this because you kind of get in the way. That's kind of where it's at for me. I set my finger here and rotate. That's how I do this one. Side of finger, throw it out. Because this is where you actually get good jimping that gives you a grip. So when you actually front flip this thing, kind of contact it down here. Much better. I honestly don't know what's the point of this or why they changed the jimping on the entire thing. Like, I can't do that. Can I do this? No. It's a weird front flipper. It does technically work, but it's not the best. Other than that, though, the knife is dramatic looking. The knife is not sitting in the center of the screen at all. It's a cool looking knife. And it's much more functional and well-designed than you'd think it would be. Kombou knives, despite oftentimes being over the top, are oftentimes also surprisingly functional in a lot of ways. He does a good job. I like his design language. That's a personal thing. You either do or you don't. But while I really like this knife, I do think the front flipper needs a slight adjustment. So, yeah. Price point, real fast, before we get done, is about $300. And I think every variant of this thing is in that $300 range. Yeah, it's all different carbon fibers, anodizations, and there are some with coated blades, blah, blah, blah. But they're all coming in right at $305. Honestly, yeah, this feels like a $305 knife. This is a $300 knife, yeah. It's definitely just crossing that threshold, and it's very well executed. Bestech does a good job. And the Blind Fury is a cool knife. It either speaks to you or it doesn't, I imagine, but it's definitely more ADC-able than you might think. What the heck do I have on there? Is that a chip? No. Maybe. Nope, that was something on the blade. I have used it. Just not recently. Bestech Blind Fury. This sort of gives you that I want something fun and a statement, and I want something that doesn't just say plain knife, but can be used and function like a reasonably good plain knife. Because this thing really does work. Easy tip axis for Tonto, too. So overall, very good. That's all for now. See you in the next one.